Hey, I'm Shannon. I have Terra, Nakesta, and Linda joining me, and today we're going to be talking to y'all about the information that we have learned in our team interview.
Okay, Shannon, what does half-life mean?
Oh, good question. So, half-life is the time that's required for half of the amount of a substance such as a medication to lose its potency or to leave the body. Knowing how to calculate half-lives of medicines is beneficial for many reasons, including knowing how much medicine to give a child, or the reasons, including how long it will stay in their body. It allows prevention of drug interactions. It's important for clinicians to know how to calculate the strength and quantity of the dose to kill infections in the body. And then this trend line equation that you see here um, is helpful to allow you to visually and mathematically identify an increase or decrease at a steady rate. Linda, I have a question for you. What's the definition for an asymptote and what are they used for?
Okay, an asymptote is a line that continually approaches a given curve but does not meet any infinite distance. An asymptote can be horizontal, vertical, or slanted line that a graph approaches but never touches, enough to convey information about the behavior of a curve and in the large, and determining the asymptote of the function is important to step the sketching in its graph. The study of the asymptotes of the functions construct in a broad sense form a part of the subject of the asymptotic. In the graph to your right, you would see how the curve line never touches the orange, the axis.
Okay.
Thank you. Nakesta, what is an equation?
Well, equation is a statement that the values of two mathematical expressions are equal. When you fix a trend line to your data, the graph will automatically calculate the value. So if you want to, you can also display yours on the chart like mine is.
Interesting. Okay. All right, Tiara, how would you explain half-lives of medication? What's your take on this?
Well, medication half-lives are the amount of time it takes for a certain dose of medication to reduce by 50% in our bodies. This is important to know when taking medication. One half-life of ibuprofen is 1.9 hours. It takes 1.9 hours to reduce by 50%. So after twice that time, or two half-lives, you still have 25% of the medication in your body. Caffeine stays in your body significantly longer with the half-life of 5.7 hours. So even after 24 hours, there is still a small percent of it in your body.
It's crazy.
Okay, Linda. What is the definition of correlation and how is it different from causation?
Correlation is a statistical measure that describes the size and direction of the relationship between two or more variables. Correlation can be a useful measure, but has its limitation as it's usually associated with measuring a linear equation. A causation indicates one event is result of the occurrence of the other event. In the graph, it shows that there is a strong correlation between the U.S. crops and genetically engineered, genetically modified crops. Depending who believes in genetically engineered, genetically modified effects our health in the long run. The difference between that's the difference between correlation and causation.
All right.
Tara, that one is for you, I think. That question was how can you explain what's happening with the correlation of the GE crops and diseases in America?
Sure. When the information on the number of GE crop acres planted by year are plotted against the rise of diseases in America, we can see a strong correlation between the two. Correlation is a connection between two or more things. By looking at the charts, you can see that as the number of acres of GE crops planted rise, so do the diseases in America. This is showing us there may be a connection. It is not, however, proven causation between the two, but it gives us an insight that they might be connected. Okay, let's see. Linda, what does probability mean and how is it used in statistics?
Probability is an extent to which an event is likely to occur, measured by the ratio of the favorable case of the whole number of the cases possible. It is used to analyze games of chance, genetics, weather prediction, and myriads of other everyday events. Statistical helps us collect and organize and interpret numerical data. In the graph, it shows the probability of people getting pulled over with one or more substances in their blood. For example, there is a 1.6 probability of being for someone to be in the influence of cannabis, alcohol while driving their car. And Nakesta, what is the proportional Venn diagram? What is a proportional Venn diagram? Sorry.
Well, it's speaking of the amount or quantity. or quantity of something. Most of the data will overlap. The circles or other shapes are sized by the proportion of the representation as a whole. And some of the shapes of like in my diagram are actually overlapping. I'm sorry. They're overlapping the others just to show that there's like multiple drugs inside someone's body at one time.
Gotcha.
Okay, Shannon, what is the significance of distribution and probability?
Well, distribution is the way something's shared among a group or an area, and it shows the possible values of data and frequency of occurrence, and it's divided by the number or a percentage. Probability, on the other hand, is the likelihood of a particular event or thing occurring, and it's measured in ratio of favorable case to the whole number of cases. In the distribution of wealth report, like the graph that you see here, we can see that the average household income is not normally distributed and cannot have a standard measure of differences between incomes because there are countless contributing factors involved. For example, normal distribution for the blue-collar worker would greatly differ from lower income level workers. So you're unable to use standard deviation when distribution is not available. Using generalized information for data would naturally skew the results. Terra, I have a question for you. What's the function of a Venn diagram?
A Venn diagram is useful to show a visual representation of information and how it may overlap. You can see the probability of these injured drivers in British Columbia being on one or more substance. Where the ovals overlap show where the data belongs to both substance categories. It is an easy way to see the relation of a group of information. In this diagram, the probability of being on all four substances is represented where all four ovals overlap in the center at 0.2%.
Okay.
Linda, what is the definition of trend line and why is it used?
Okay. A trend line is a straight line that connects to, is that the right one? Okay, sorry. A trend line is a straight line that connects two or more points and then extends into the future to act as a line of support and resistance. The graph shows a trend line of 16 to 24-year-olds who drive with handheld cell phones. The points are on or close to the trend line and therefore they have a close connection to one another. A trend line are used to show a trend with the rest of the information on the graph. The graph shows that there is a negative trend with the 16 to 20-year-olds who have a handheld cell phone. The trend line can be negative, positive, or have no correlation at all.
Gotcha.
And Nakesta, I have a question for you. What is an exponential trend line?
Well, I'm glad you asked it. Exponential trend line is a curved line that is Most useful when a data value rises or falls at increasingly higher rates, showing the direction of the data. So it just basically shows that something is either increasing or increasing, decreasing or increasing at a steady rate. And on my chart, you can actually see that my Claritin half-life shows where the milligram started off hot, and as time went on, everything kind of dropped down, like sloped down. Yeah. So that's a example of that. Okay, Shannon, what are false reports and outliers?
Okay, well, false reports, they tend to occur when causation and correlation are confused, and some examples can be seen right here. The difference between first two reports on this report section were the independent studies, whereas the FDA report is produced by the Federal Government Department of Health, and which claims to be protecting us. And so the first two reports recognize and reveal safety hazards, such as to the GMOs, and at the very least would like the products that are in them to be labeled so that we can make informed decisions. The FDA report, on the other hand, over here maintains that they're perfectly safe to consume. So now an outlier is a point of observation distance from all other, and it's usually indicative of an error that causes problems with the analysis. There's a texting and driving report that demonstrates an outlier for the 70-plus age range. I didn't have room to put that one on here, but it shows the effects of if you just change just even one number, how it will skew the graphs, and so the information will be off. So standard deviation and coefficient of variation in the spread of data will all be affected if you have an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Nakesta, what is an outlier for you? Give us your take on it.
Well, an outlier is a number in a set of data that is very different from the other numbers. The outlier is usually much higher or like very, very low. On this graph, you see that. On this graph, you can see that on the graph on the left, the red dot that's at the bottom, it would, I just threw in a very smaller number inside there, and you can actually see that, yeah, it's kind of off to the side. And then on my other one, I put that high number up there, and you can see that it's kind of up. So you can pretty much tell right off the bat what the outlier is inside a set of data.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Okay, Linda, I have a question for you. What does blood alcohol levels and how is it important for our society?
Okay, blood alcohol level measures the amount of alcohol in your body, therefore traveling through your body and every organ, including your brain. In its simplest form, calculating a person's BAC level is based on how much alcohol level went in and what kind of body went into what kind of body over a period of how much time. According to the BAC graph, at 160 pounds, 3 drinks would put me in at a 0.9 intoxicated level. Blood level is important because it could help police officers keep irresponsible people from driving or being out in the public. The reaction of a person who has reached the 0 point alcohol level would have an average reaction of 2.1 seconds to react. And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
And Terra, what would happen if an outliner is in a group of data?
Okay. In this group of data, we have drivers by age group that use handheld devices. The data sets have a relatively normal distribution. So then when we add an outlier to the group of data, the chart becomes skewed compared to the other information in the chart. An outlier deviates from the mean, and this changes the mean, the standard deviation, and the coefficient of variation. It is very difficult to chart data with an outlier. And Nakesta, let's see. How would an outlier affect a distribution curve?
As you can see on the charts, I had changed one of the numbers on the axis and made it extremely small. And on the other one, I made extremely large. So on the first graph, you can see that when I made it extremely small, it kind of curved down, it sloped down and made the distribution curve start high and go down. And on the right side, you can see how it kind of drags up right. So that's an example there.
Okay.
Okay, Shannon, how can you explain coefficient of variation?
Sure, I'll try at least. It's the relative standard deviation or statistical measure of data dispersion in a series around the mean. It's usually expressed in percentages as the relation of standard deviation to mean. And several reports from the texting and driving segment that we did, here's age group 25 to 69. We can see it played out here. Notice the standard deviation is 1% of the mean, and which is 4.9. So the coefficient of variation is calculated dividing the standard deviation by the expected value, and it represents the ratio of those two parts. So the CV is a useful statistic for comparing the degree of variation from one data series to the next. Terra, what conclusion can you draw from the distribution of U.S. wealth that we're seeing here on these graphs?
From looking at the charts, it's easy to see that the owners of U.S. wealth are not evenly distributed. The chart compares the amount of wealth in relation to the percent of the population that owns it. The largest percent of the population shares the smallest portion of wealth, and on the opposite end, we see that the smallest percent of the population share the largest. We see the smallest percent of the population share the largest amount of all U.S. wealth. I can say from this information that in the U.S., most of the population is on the low end of the wealth spectrum. And Shannon, hey, can you explain percentages and how they are being used in the corresponding reports?
Absolutely. Percentages are the number amount per 100. It is in proportion to a large sum. In the financial reports that you see reflected here, the pay ranges on the pay scale are for a particular career. Also, percentages represent the cost of living in 3 separate regions of the country over in this graph. Statistically speaking, New York is 94.3% more expensive than Dallas. I thought that was amazing, although not surprising at all. With housing expense being a staggering 257% more expensive in New York City. If we look back at the wealth distribution reports, there's percentages that represent how our federal tax dollars are allocated, and those are demonstrated right over here. Nakesta, why is it important to label your axis correctly? I know I sometimes struggle with that.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Okay. It's important to label them correctly because it will show the information wrong. And here I have 2 of the same graphs, but with the same information, but because of the axis is labeled wrong, it shows the information different. So on the first graph, you can see that it is counting different than the second graph. So it made all the points, the data points on there all distorted. And when I labeled it right, counting by ones, you can see that actually everything runs together and they stayed in the same bracket. They wasn't spread out like shown on the first graph. Okay, Shannon, what is a histogram and how is it used in statistic analysis?
Yep. All right, let me move this out of my way. So a histogram is a graph that displays statistical information in the form of rectangles, and it's to show frequency of data in intervals. You'll note the high arch here. The distribution shape on this histogram was about an impaired driving report. I know, Linda, you referenced that earlier. The more alcohol content in the body, the slower the reaction time. That's what this data was covering. There's an even distribution in the standard deviation in these rectangular columns. The average reaction time, as you pointed out, was 2.4 seconds. And, you know, when you're behind the wheel of the vehicle, that translates to a really long time. So, Linda, let me ask you, what's the definition of skewed right? Can you explain that for us?
Okay, thank you. The definition of skewed right is when the mean is typically greater than the median. The tail of the distribution on the right hand, which is the positive side, is longer than the left side. The family's income graph shows that the percentage of the income being made is higher to the right than to the left. Skewed right could help us understand the uneven distribution of data. Skewed left would be the negative, and normal distribution is not as skewed because it's perfectly symmetrical. Skewed right can also help demonstrate a clear picture of positive information.
Okay.
And Terra, I have a question for you. Why might getting a raise at work not be worth it?
Getting a raise may not always be worth it when you consider what tax bracket it will put you in. The chart shown for filing head of household shows that a $2,000 raise for $50,000 income is not actually worth it. The taxes that you have to pay on the new income is considerably more than you would pay before the raise, and the money you take home is less. Depending on how you file your taxes with the same raise, the tax bracket table has different income limits, so the raise could actually be worth it. And you can see the difference in the amount left over comparatively in the new and old pay.
Wow. All right, well, that is the last of it. Let's wrap this up. Thank you for joining us. We're happy that we could hopefully educate you on one or two things here, and we hope you'll have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to clock that time.